The wind cut through Cedar Ridge like a blade, carrying dust and the sharp smell of sage across the empty streets. Evening light painted everything in shades of orange and gold, stretching long shadows across the worn storefronts and wooden sidewalks. It was the kind of day that reminded people just how small they really were. Mary Whitfield sat on the rough steps outside Miller's General Store, holding her 7-year-old daughter close against the cold. Clara trembled beneath the thin wool shawl wrapped around them both, her small body pressed tight against her mother's chest. 3 days. 3 days since they had arrived in this dusty Texas town with nothing but the clothes on their backs and a handful of coins that had long since disappeared. 3 days of sleeping in alleys, begging for scraps, and knocking on every door in town searching for work. But Cedar Ridge was a small town in a hard year, and no one had room for a stranger with a child. "Mama," Clara whispered, her voice thin and weak, "I am so hungry." Mary closed her eyes, fighting back the tears that threatened to fall. She smoothed her daughter's tangled hair with trembling fingers, trying to offer comfort she could barely feel herself. "I know, sweetheart. Just a little longer." But the words felt hollow, even to her own ears. She had said the same thing yesterday, and the day before that. The truth was, Mary had no idea what she was going to do. She had knocked on every door in Cedar Ridge. She had offered to cook, to clean, to mend clothes, to scrub floors. She had begged for any work at all, anything to feed her daughter and put a roof over their heads. But every answer had been the same. "Times are hard, ma'am. No work here, no space, no help." Mary pulled Clara closer, feeling the sharp edges of her daughter's ribs through the thin fabric of her dress. Clara had not eaten in 2 days, 2 full days without food, and winter was coming fast. The desperation clawed at Mary's chest like a living thing. She had survived so much already. She had buried a husband who turned out to be a stranger. She had fled Denver in the middle of the night with nothing but her daughter and a prayer. She had traveled for weeks across dangerous territory, running from men who wanted to collect debts she did not owe. And now, after all of that, she was going to watch her daughter starve on the streets of a town that did not want them. "God help us," she whispered into Clara's hair. "Please, someone help us." Heavy footsteps sounded on the wooden boardwalk, and Mary stiffened. She had learned to be wary of men, especially men who approached women alone at dusk. She pulled Clara tighter against her chest and kept her eyes on the ground. The footsteps stopped directly in front of her. "Ma'am." The voice was deep, smooth in a rugged kind of way. Mary forced herself to look up. A man stood before her, tall and broad, with shoulders shaped by years of working cattle. His clothes were dusty from the trail, his hat shadowing a weathered face lined by sun and wind. He looked like the land itself, rough, steady, tired, but his eyes were kind. Mary straightened her spine, refusing to cower even in her desperate state. "Yes, sir." The man studied her for a long moment, taking in her worn dress, her hollow cheeks, her daughter's pale face. His expression did not change, but something shifted behind his eyes. "You new to Cedar Ridge?" It was not really a question. "Yes," Mary answered. "We arrived Monday." He nodded slowly, as if confirming something he already knew. "Work's hard to come by," he said. His tone was not unkind, just honest, especially for a woman alone. "I am not afraid of hard work," Mary replied, lifting her chin. "I will do anything." Something flickered in the man's gaze. Respect, maybe, or recognition. He removed his hat, running a hand through his dark hair. He seemed to be wrestling with something, making a decision. "Name's Ethan Cole," he said finally. "I run the Double C Ranch about 5 miles north of here." Mary waited, unsure what he would say next. Men did not usually introduce themselves to desperate women on the street unless they wanted something. And she had learned the hard way that what men wanted was rarely good. But Ethan Cole did not leer at her or make suggestive comments. He simply looked at her with those steady gray eyes and spoke the most shocking words she had ever heard. "Your daughter needs a home," he said quietly, "and my bed needs a wife." Mary jerked to her feet so fast that Clara stumbled. Heat flooded her face, a mixture of fury and shame burning through her veins. "How dare you!" Several people on the street had stopped walking, their ears perked for gossip. Mary could feel their eyes on her, judging, assuming the worst. "Wait." Ethan raised a hand, his expression calm. "I am not meaning anything improper. I am offering marriage, proper and legal." Mary froze, her anger giving way to confusion. Marriage. To a stranger. The word hung between them like a challenge. Ethan continued, speaking with the straightforward tone of a man who did not waste words. I am a widower. Lost my wife 2 years back. I have got a daughter named Sarah. She is 9 years old and she needs a woman's guidance. I need help in the house and I need a partner. Someone to share the work and the life. He paused, letting the words sink in. I am offering security, Mrs. Whitfield. A roof over your head, food on the table, schooling for your girl. Safety. Clara tugged at Mary's sleeve, her eyes wide with wonder despite her hunger. Mama, does the man have a real house? Ethan actually smiled at the child, and the expression softened his rugged features in a way Mary had not expected. A big house, he said gently, with a warm kitchen and a fireplace. We have got chickens and horses and plenty of room to run around. Clara's face lit up with hope, and Mary's heart squeezed painfully in her chest. This was madness, complete and utter madness. She could not marry a stranger she had met 5 minutes ago on a dusty street corner. Could she? I need time to think, she whispered. Fair enough. Ethan reached into his pocket and pressed several coins into her hand before she could protest. Get a meal at Murphy's Cafe. Feed your girl. I will be loading supplies at the general store for the next hour or so. If you want to see the ranch, you can ride with me. No decisions today. Just look. He tipped his hat and walked away, leaving Mary standing on the boardwalk with coins in her palm and chaos in her mind. Clara tugged at her sleeve again. Mama, can we eat now, please? Mary looked down at her daughter's hollow cheeks and hungry eyes. Then she looked at the coins in her hand. Enough for a hot meal. Enough to fill Clara's empty stomach for the first time in days. Come on, sweetheart, she said softly. Let us get you some food. An hour later, with warm stew settling in their bellies and color returning to Clara's cheeks, Mary found herself standing beside Ethan Cole's wagon. She did not know why she had come. Perhaps it was curiosity, perhaps it was desperation. Perhaps it was the way Clara had smiled for the first time in weeks when Ethan had described the ranch. Or perhaps it was simply because she had no other options left. You do not have to agree to anything, Ethan reminded her as he helped Clara up onto the wagon seat. Just look around. Meet Sarah. I will bring you back before dark. Mary nodded, though fear and hope tugged at her chest in equal measure. As the wagon rolled out of town and into the endless grassland, she watched Ethan from the corner of her eye. He drove the horses with easy confidence, pointing out landmarks along the way. That creek there floods every spring. Those hills hide good hunting ground. The Johnson place is over that ridge. He spoke about the land with quiet pride, like a man who loved what he had built. Clara pressed against Mary's side, her eyes wide as saucers as she took in the vast open spaces. She had never seen anything like this. Denver had been all brick and smoke and danger. This was something else entirely. Why offer marriage to a stranger? Mary finally asked, unable to contain the question any longer. Ethan kept his eyes on the trail, his jaw working for a moment before he answered. Because I know what it is like to be alone. He paused, then continued. And because my girl needs more than a father who cannot braid her hair straight. Despite everything, Mary felt a small smile tug at her lips. Clara fell asleep against her shoulder as the wagon rolled on, the setting sun painting the prairie in shades of pink and gold. And when they crested the final rise and Mary saw the Double C Ranch spread out before her, something deep inside her loosened. A solid house with smoke curling from the chimney, a big red barn surrounded by corrals, cattle dotting the distant hills, fields ready for planting. It looked like safety. It looked like hope. It looked like the life she had stopped believing she would ever have. The wagon had barely stopped when the front door burst open and a young girl came running out. Papa, Sarah called, her braids flying behind her. Who are they? Guests, Ethan said calmly, climbing down from the wagon. This is Mrs. Whitfield and her daughter Clara. Sarah skidded to a halt, studying Mary with bright gray eyes that looked just like her father's. She was all sharp edges and stubborn chin, a girl being raised wild on the prairie. Are you the new housekeeper? The question was direct, almost challenging. Mary felt heat rise to her cheeks. We are just visiting. For now, Ethan echoed, and the words hung in the air like a promise. Sarah's eyes narrowed, calculating. Then she turned to Clara, who was rubbing sleep from her eyes. Can you catch frogs? Clara blinked. I do not know. I never tried. Sarah grinned, and suddenly she looked like the 9-year-old she was supposed to be. I will teach you. Come on. Before Mary could protest, Sarah had grabbed Clara's hand and was dragging her toward the barn, chattering about the creek and the best spots to find tadpoles. Clara looked back over her shoulder, and for the first time in months, Mary saw something other than fear in her daughter's eyes. She saw joy. Ethan stepped up beside her, his voice low. She has not smiled like that since her mama passed. Mary swallowed hard. Neither has Clara, not for a long time. They stood in silence, watching their daughters disappear around the corner of the barn, and Mary felt the first crack form in the wall she had built around her heart. Maybe, just maybe, this crazy plan could work. Maybe this stranger could save them both. The inside of the house was clean but lacked softness. Every piece of furniture was sturdy and practical, built by hands that valued function over beauty. The shelves were plain, the walls nearly bare, the curtains simple and faded. Everything carried a man's touch. Simple, practical, a little lonely. Mary's eyes landed on a framed photograph sitting on the mantel. A woman with dark braids and kind eyes smiled out at her, frozen forever in a single moment. Margaret, Ethan's late wife. She was beautiful, Mary said quietly. Ethan came to stand beside her, his expression unreadable. She was everything. The words were simple, but they held a weight of grief that Mary understood all too well. She had lost someone too, not to death, but to betrayal. Sometimes that hurt even worse. A girl's voice broke the silence. Are you staying for supper? Mary turned to find Sarah standing in the doorway, Clara trailing behind her. Both girls were already covered in dirt, their cheeks flushed with excitement. If your father does not mind, Mary said carefully. Ethan nodded, already planned on it. He moved toward the kitchen with the ease of a man who had learned to manage a household alone. Sarah immediately began setting the table, while Clara watched with wide eyes, clearly unused to such organization. You know how to set a table, Clara asked Sarah. Course I do, Sarah shrugged. Papa taught me. He says everyone in this house pulls their weight. Mary followed Ethan into the kitchen, watching as he pulled supplies from the pantry. The wooden table was spotless, perhaps too spotless, as if no one used it much anymore. He set 2 cups of milk in front of the girls and poured coffee for the adults. I need to explain myself better, Ethan said, settling into a chair across from Mary. She folded her hands tightly around her cup, letting the warmth steady her nerves. I am listening. Ethan took a breath, his gray eyes meeting hers directly. I am not a man who speaks in fancy ways. Out here, life is simple. Hard, but simple. My wife died 2 years back. Childbirth took her and the babe both. His voice roughened, but he pressed on. Since then, it has been just me and Sarah. I am doing my best, Mrs. Whitfield, but a girl needs more than a father who can barely sew a button. And this ranch, it needs a woman's hands. It needs warmth. It needs balance. Mary said nothing, waiting. I need a partner, Ethan continued. Someone strong, someone steady. I am offering that in return. A home, safety, a place for you and Clara to build a life. You are proposing marriage, Mary said softly, to someone you do not know. People out here marry strangers every day. Ethan's tone was matter of fact. Mail-order brides travel across the country for men they have never met. At least you have had a chance to look me in the eye. Mary could not argue with that logic. She had heard the stories of women who answered newspaper advertisements and arrived at ranches sight unseen. At least Ethan was giving her a choice. But why us, she whispered. You could find someone else, someone without baggage. Ethan was quiet for a moment, considering his words. When I saw you holding your daughter on those steps, he said finally, chin high, back straight, even when you were starving, I saw strength. Margaret had that. You remind me of her. Not in looks, in spirit. The comparison did not sting the way Mary expected. It felt sincere, even honoring. She took a shaky breath. I should tell you something, she said. My husband did not just die. He was killed. He owed debts, bad debts, to dangerous men. Denver, Ethan asked quietly. She nodded, surprised he had guessed. That is a rough city, he said. But this is Texas. We protect our own here. Their eyes held for the long moment, and Mary felt something warm and frightening bloom in her chest. This man was offering her more than just a roof and food. He was offering protection, safety, a chance to stop running. Mama, Clara's voice drifted in from the other room. Sarah says, there are kittens in the barn. Can we go see them? Mary exhaled, grateful for the interruption. After supper, sweetheart, Ethan stood, his chair scraping against the wooden floor. You can stay the night. Guest room is clean. In the morning, I will show you the rest of the ranch. No pressure. You decide when you are ready. That night, Mary tucked Clara into the softest bed they had slept in for months. The sheets were clean and smelled like lavender. The quilt was thick and warm. Through the window, the wide moonlit prairie stretched endlessly, still and shimmering in silver light. Mama, Clara whispered, her eyes already drooping. I like it here. Mary smoothed her daughter's hair, her heart aching. I know you do, sweetheart. Can we stay? Please. The question hung in the darkness, heavy with hope. We will see, Mary said softly. Now sleep. Clara's breathing evened out within minutes, the exhaustion of the past weeks finally catching up with her. But Mary could not sleep. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the shadows moving gently across the floor, her thoughts too loud to ignore. Could she really do this? Could she bind her life to Ethan Cole? Could she trust a man again after everything she had been through? Her husband William had seemed kind once too. He had promised her safety and love and a good life. And then he had gambled away everything they owned, borrowed money from the worst kind of men, and gotten himself killed over a poker debt. The men who killed him had not been satisfied with just his death. They wanted their money. And when they could not get it from a dead man, they had turned to his widow. Mary had fled Denver with nothing but Clara and the clothes on her back. She had been running ever since, but she was so tired of running. A sound drifted up from outside and Mary moved to the window. Below, in the moonlit yard, Ethan walked the perimeter of the house, checking locks and scanning the darkness. He did this every night, she realized, protecting what was his. Something shifted in Mary's chest, something that felt dangerously like hope. For the first time in a long time, she did not feel afraid. She felt safe. Morning came early, announced by the crowing of a rooster and the bright Texas sun streaming through the curtains. Mary woke to find Clara already at the window, her nose pressed against the glass. Mama, look, the horses are so big. Mary smiled despite her exhaustion and joined her daughter at the window. Below, Ethan was already at work, leading horses from the barn to the corral. His movements were efficient and confident, the motions of a man who had done this 1,000 times before. The girls followed the smell of coffee to the kitchen, where Ethan stood at the stove and rolled up sleeves, frying bacon with a practiced hand. I cook, he said before Mary could comment. Someone has to. Mary smiled despite herself. It smells wonderful. Breakfast was simple but warm. Fresh eggs, crispy bacon, biscuits with honey. Clara ate like she had never seen food before, and even Sarah seemed livelier than the night before. When the plates were cleared, Ethan turned to Mary. Would you like to see the rest of the ranch? She found herself nodding before she even realized it. The day unfolded slowly, gently. Ethan showed her the garden first, wilted and overgrown but salvageable. Margaret used to tend this, he said quietly. I have not had the heart to keep it up. Mary knelt down, running her fingers through the dry soil. It could be beautiful again. Ethan watched her with an expression she could not quite read. The house needs a woman, he said, someone who can make it feel lived in again. He showed her the barn next, where Clara was already cradling a tiny orange kitten in her arms, her eyes shining with wonder. Can I keep him? Can I keep him, Mama? Please. That is up to Mr. Cole, Mary said carefully. Ethan shrugged. Every barn needs cats. Keeps the mice away. Clara squealed with delight and buried her face in the kitten's fur. He showed her the corral where Sarah perched on the top rail like she had been born there, watching the horses with expert eyes. She wants to be a rancher when she grows up, Ethan said, just like her papa. Mary watched the girl's confident posture, so different from her own cautious daughter. She seems fearless. She is. Ethan's voice held equal parts pride and worry, sometimes too fearless. Finally, he took her to the top of a small rise that overlooked the entire ranch. The land rolled away in every direction. golden under the morning sun. My father built this place from nothing, Ethan said. Came here with $10 in a dream. Now it is the biggest spread in the county. Mary looked out at the vast expanse of land, trying to imagine the work it had taken to build something like this. It is beautiful. It could be yours, too. Ethan turned to face her. If you want it. Mary's breath caught. I need to think, she whispered. Take all the time you need. But even as she said the words, Mary knew the truth. Her decision had already been made. She just was not ready to admit it yet. The peace did not last. 3 more days passed at the Double C Ranch, each one more comfortable than the last. Clara bloomed like a flower in springtime, running through the fields with Sarah, learning to feed the chickens and brush the horses. The color returned to her cheeks. The fear faded from her eyes. And Mary found herself settling into a rhythm she had not expected. Cooking breakfast with Ethan, tending the neglected garden, mending Sarah's torn dresses with careful stitches. It felt like home, but home was a dangerous thing to believe in. The morning of the 4th day broke with a pale gold light spreading across the ranch, soft and calm. Mary was sweeping the porch, enjoying the cool morning air, when she heard the sound that made her blood run cold. Fast horses, the thunder of hooves, the sharp urgency of riders pushing their mounts hard. She knew that sound. She had heard it in her nightmares for months. Mary's broom clattered to the ground as Ethan stepped out beside her. His face was calm but alert, and his hand drifted automatically to the gun holstered at his hip. Get the girls inside, he said quietly. But it was too late. 3 riders crested the hill, armed and hard-faced, the kind of men Mary had prayed never to see again. They pulled their horses to a stop in a cloud of dust, and the leader fixed his cold eyes directly on her. He was thin, with a cruel mouth and the look of a man who enjoyed causing pain. Mary Whitfield, he said, been looking for you. Mary's stomach dropped. Her past had finally caught up. Clara peeked out from behind the door, trembling. Sarah stood stiff beside her, jaw set with a stubbornness that matched her father's. Ethan did not move. What business do you have with my wife? The words hit Mary like a physical blow. Wife. He was claiming her as his own, protecting her with a single word. Your wife, the leader sneered, exchanging glances with his companions. That is convenient. Married, Ethan said firmly. Legal and recorded in town. You can check the courthouse records if you like. It was a bluff. They were not legally married yet, but the certainty in Ethan's voice did not waver. The leader's eyes narrowed. This woman owes money. Cyrus Morrison wants his due. Her dead husband borrowed $10,000, and someone has to pay it back. Mary felt the ground shift beneath her feet. $10,000. She had not known the debt was that large. William had never told her anything about his dealings until it was too late. Morrison does not run this county, Ethan replied evenly, and a woman's debts die with her husband once she remarries. That is Texas law. The riders shifted uneasily in their saddles. Behind them, several ranch hands had emerged from the bunkhouse, rifles in hand. They formed a silent line behind Ethan, their faces grim. The standoff stretched long and tight, the tension thick enough to choke on. Finally, the leader spat into the dust. We will be checking that marriage certificate, he said, and if you are lying, we will be back. You do that, Ethan said, then ride on. For a terrible moment, Mary thought the men would not leave. She could see the violence coiled in the leader's shoulders, the way his hand twitched toward his gun. But he was outnumbered, and he knew it. This is not over, he said. Then he wheeled his horse around and kicked it into a gallop, his companions following close behind. Mary did not move until the dust had settled and the sound of hooves had faded to nothing. Then her legs gave out, and she sank onto the porch steps, shaking. Ethan dismissed the ranch hands with a nod and came to sit beside her. They will not touch you, he said, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. Not here, not while I am breathing. Mary looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. I should have told you everything. About the debt, about how much William owed. You told me enough. Ethan's hand covered hers, warm and steady. It does not change anything. How can you say that? She whispered. Those men will come back. They will check the courthouse. They will know we are not really married. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then we should fix that. Mary stared at him. You still want to marry me? After this, more than ever. He squeezed her hand. Those men think they can scare you into running again. I say we show them different. That afternoon, Mary found Clara crying under the kitchen table. She crawled underneath and gathered her daughter into her arms, holding her tight until the sobs finally eased. Are those men going to take us away? Clara hiccuped. Mary shook her head firmly. Not as long as Ethan is here. He protects what is his. The word his echoed in her mind long after Clara had calmed down. 3 days ago, she had been a stranger begging on the streets. Now she was his. Part of this ranch. Part of this family. Part of something she had stopped believing she deserved. That night, Mary could not sleep. She sat by the window, watching the moonlit yard where Ethan walked his rounds, lantern in hand, back and forth, checking every shadow, every corner. He did this every night, protecting what was his, protecting her. The next morning, Mary woke with a decision made. She dressed carefully, braided her hair, and went to find Ethan. He was in the barn, mending a bridle with practiced hands. I have been thinking, she said. Ethan set down the bridle and gave her his full attention. About what those men said, about the marriage. And, Mary took a breath, I think we should make it real. The wedding was simple, held in the small Cedar Ridge church with just the girls and a few ranch hands as witnesses. Mary wore a borrowed dress that was slightly too big, and Ethan wore his Sunday best, a dark suit that made his gray eyes look almost silver. The preacher read the vows quickly, and when Ethan slipped a simple gold band onto Mary's finger, she felt something shift inside her chest. This was real now. She was Mrs. Ethan Cole. The girls had insisted on decorating the wagon with wildflowers for the ride home. Sarah had even made a sign that said, "Just married" in crooked letters. Clara giggled the entire way back to the ranch, while Sarah pretended to be too grown up for such things. That night, after the girls were in bed, Mary and Ethan sat on the porch in companionable silence. The stars were thick overhead, scattered across the velvet sky like diamonds on black cloth. "Thank you," Mary said softly, "for everything." Ethan shook his head. "You do not need to thank me. I do." She turned to face him. "You saved us. You gave Clara a home. You gave me a chance to start over." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "You saved us too, you know." Mary frowned. "How?" "Sarah has not smiled like this since her mama died." Ethan's voice was rough with emotion. "She has been so angry, so lost. And then you and Clara came along, and suddenly she has someone to teach, someone to protect, someone to care about besides her grief." Mary had not thought about it that way. She had been so focused on her own survival that she had not considered what she might be giving in return. "We saved each other then." Ethan met her eyes and something warm passed between them. "I suppose we did." The following weeks were a whirlwind of adjustment. Mary threw herself into making the house a home, scrubbing floors, mending curtains, bringing life back to the neglected garden. Ethan watched her transform his house with something like wonder in his eyes. The girls became inseparable. Sarah taught Clara how to ride horses, catch frogs, and climb trees. Clara taught Sarah how to sew, braid hair, and make flower crowns. They were sisters in every way that mattered. But not everyone in Cedar Ridge was happy about the new arrangement. One afternoon, Sarah burst through the front door, mud splattered across her dress and fury blazing in her eyes. "What happened?" Mary asked, immediately concerned. Sally Morrison pushed Clara in the mud. Sarah's voice shook with anger. "She said you are a cheat who trapped Papa into marrying you. She said you are a gold digger who only wanted his money." Mary's heart sank. This was exactly what she had feared. The poison of adults spreading to their children. "What did you do?" Sarah's chin lifted with defiance. "I pushed her right back, and then Clara dumped her lunch bucket on her head." Despite everything, a laugh escaped Mary's lips. "You did what?" Clara appeared in the doorway, her dress muddy but her eyes bright with satisfaction. "She deserved it, Mama. Nobody talks about our family like that." "Our family." The words wrapped around Mary's heart and squeezed. Ethan appeared in the doorway behind Clara, his expression caught somewhere between stern and amused. "Girls," he said carefully, "violence is not the answer." "Sometimes it is," Mary interrupted softly. She pulled both girls into a hug, kissing the tops of their heads. "Thank you for defending us." Sarah looked up at her with shining eyes. "You are our mama now. No one gets to talk about our family like that." Mary had to turn away to hide the tears that spilled down her cheeks. For so long, she had been alone. Just her and Clara against the world. Now she had a family. Later that evening, Mary found Ethan in the barn, brushing down his horse. She stood in the doorway watching him work and felt her heart swell with an emotion she was afraid to name. "Ethan," she began. He set down the brush and turned to face her. "I need to decide," she said, "about us." He waited. Mary took a breath. "When those men came, when Sarah defended me, when Clara asked if we were safe, I realized something." She stepped closer. "We are already a family. I know I came here desperate. I know this started as necessity. But these weeks, watching Clara bloom, hearing Sarah call me mama, spending time with you, I have realized something." "What is that?" "I do not want this to be a business arrangement anymore." Mary's voice trembled. "I want it to be real." Ethan stepped closer, leaving just a foot between them. "Mary," he said quietly, "I have wanted that from the beginning." He reached out and took her hands in his calloused fingers warm against her skin. "I will never push you," he continued, "but I would be lying if I said I have not hoped. From the first moment I saw you on those steps, something told me you were meant to be here." Mary's heart pounded in her chest. "I want to stay," she whispered, "if you still want me." Ethan did not speak. He simply drew her close and rested his forehead against hers. "I want you," he said. "Not for the kitchen, not for the house, for me." Winter settled over the Double C Ranch like a thick white blanket, softening the harsh edges of the land and turning the world into a quiet wonderland. Snow piled high against the fences and frosted the windows of the house. Inside, the family had never been warmer. Mary had transformed the house into a proper home. Curtains now hung in every window, cheerful and bright against the gray winter skin. The kitchen always smelled of fresh bread and simmering stew. The sitting room had cushions and quilts and a rocking chair that Mary had rescued from the barn and refinished herself. The girls had their own room now, decorated with their artwork and treasures. Clara's orange kitten, now named Marmalade, slept at the foot of their bed every night, and Mary and Ethan had begun to build something neither of them had expected to find. It started with small things: a brush of hands while passing dishes at dinner, a shared look across the room when the girls said something funny, the way Ethan always made sure Mary's coffee cup was full before she even realized it was empty. They talked every night on the porch, even when the cold forced them to wrap in blankets. They shared stories about their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Ethan told her about Margaret, how they had met at a church social when they were 17, how he had known from the first moment that she was the one. Mary told him about William, about how charming he had been in the beginning, about how that charm had hidden a sickness for gambling that eventually destroyed everything. "I blame myself for a long time," she admitted one night. "I thought if I had been a better wife, he would not have needed to escape into cards." Ethan shook his head firmly. "A man's weakness is his own responsibility, not his wife's." The words lifted a weight from Mary's shoulders that she had not realized she was carrying. Slowly, carefully, they began to build trust. Ethan started including Mary in decisions about the ranch. He showed her the account books, explained the cattle business, asked her opinion on which fields to plant in spring, and Mary began to let her guard down. She stopped flinching when Ethan moved suddenly. She stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the kindness to turn cruel. Ethan was not William. He was steady and honest and exactly who he appeared to be. One snowy evening, the girls begged to play in the fresh powder. Mary bundled them up until they looked like little bears, and Ethan surprised everyone by initiating a snowball fight. "No fair," Sarah shrieked as her father pelted her with a perfectly aimed throw. "You are too tall. That is not my fault." Ethan grinned, ducking as Clara launched a snowball at his head. Mary watched from the porch, her heart so full it ached. This was what she had dreamed of as a girl: a family, a home, someone who made her feel safe and loved. And somehow, against all odds, she had found it. "Get her!" Clara shouted, and suddenly Mary found herself under attack from all sides. She shrieked and ran, but Ethan caught her around the waist, spinning her through the falling snow. The girls cheered. When he set her down, they were both overwhelmed, breathless and laughing. Their faces were inches apart, their breath mingling in the cold air. And then Ethan kissed her. It was quick and gentle, barely more than a brush of lips, but it sent warmth flooding through Mary's entire body. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," he murmured. Mary smiled up at him, her cheeks flushed from more than the cold. "Then why did you wait so long? I was not sure you were ready." She rose up on her tiptoes and kissed him again, longer this time. "I am ready now." Christmas came, and with it a joy that Mary had not felt in years. Ethan had somehow arranged for presents for everyone, hidden away in the barn for weeks. Sarah got a new saddle, Clara got a dollhouse that Ethan had built himself, and Mary found a beautiful pearl brooch that had belonged to Ethan's mother. "It is too much," she protested. Ethan shook his head. "Nothing is too much for you." That night, after the girls had fallen asleep in a pile of wrapping paper and new toys, Mary and Ethan sat together by the fire. Snow fell softly outside, and the house was filled with the warm glow of lamplight. "Thank you," Mary said softly. "For all of this." Ethan pulled her close. "Thank you for saying yes." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the flames dance in the hearth, and then Mary said the words that had been building in her heart for weeks. "I love you, Ethan." He went very still. Then he pulled back to look at her, his gray eyes shining. "I have loved you since the day you looked at me like I was a better man than I ever thought I could be." He kissed her then, deep and slow, and Mary felt the last walls around her heart crumbled to dust. She was home. Spring came early that year, melting the snow and filling the prairie with wildflowers. The Double C Ranch hummed with new life. Calves were born, crops were planted, and the garden Mary had rescued now burst with color. But trouble came with the thaw. It started with small things. A fence cut here, a water trough poisoned there, cattle going missing one or two at a time. Ethan tried to hide his worry from Mary, but she saw the lines deepening around his eyes, the way he rode out earlier and returned later each day. Finally, she cornered him in the barn. "Tell me what is happening." Ethan sighed. "Someone is hitting the ranch. Sabotage mostly. I think it is Morrison's people, trying to drive us out." Morrison, the man who had sent those riders for Mary months ago. "Is this because of me? Because of the debt?" Ethan shook his head. "Morrison has wanted this land for years. He offered to buy it from my father 3 times. Pa always said no. Morrison does not take no well." Mary felt guilt wash over her. "If I had not come here, if you had not married me." Ethan gripped her shoulders firmly. "Listen to me. You are not the cause of this. Morrison has been circling this ranch since before you were born. The only difference is now he thinks he can use your past as an excuse." Mary nodded, but the guilt did not ease. "What can I do to help?" Ethan looked at her for a long moment. "Can you shoot?" "My father taught me when I was 12. A slow smile spread across Ethan's face. "Then let us make sure you have not forgotten." For the next 2 weeks, Ethan taught Mary everything he knew about defending the ranch. She practiced with rifles and pistols until her aim was steady. She learned to ride fast and hard. She studied the land, memorizing every hill and hollow where trouble might hide. The ranch hands watched with newfound respect. This was no delicate flower-playing house. This was a woman ready to fight for what was hers. Late one night, Mary woke to the sound of commotion in the yard. She grabbed the rifle beside her bed and ran to the window. Rustlers. At least a dozen of them, trying to drive the cattle from the north pasture. Ethan was already saddling his horse when she burst into the barn. "Stay here," he ordered. "Keep the girls safe." "No," Mary grabbed a bridle from the wall. "You are not going alone." Ethan stared at her. "Mary, these men are dangerous, I know." She swung up onto her horse with practiced ease. "That is why you need me with you." For a moment, she thought he would argue. Then he shook his head, something like pride flickering in his eyes. "Stay close." They rode hard into the night, joining the ranch hands who were already engaging the rustlers. The fight was chaotic, gunshots and shouts, and the thunder of hooves. Mary did not hesitate. When a rustler raised his gun toward Ethan's back, she fired first. Her shot hit his hand, sending the gun spinning away. He went down screaming. Another man tried to flee with a group of cattle. Mary cut him off, her horse wheeling in perfect response to her commands. She herded him back toward the ranch hands, who quickly subdued him. By dawn, it was over. 30 head of cattle recovered. 6 rustlers captured and tied up for the sheriff. Not a single ranch hand seriously injured. Ethan found Mary slumped against a fence post, exhausted but unhurt. He pulled her into his arms without a word. "You were incredible." She laughed weakly against his chest. "I told you. My father taught me." Ethan pulled back to look at her, his eyes shining with emotion. "You saved my life tonight. We are partners." Mary reached up to touch his face. That is what partners do. When they returned to the house, the girls were waiting on the porch with the sun rising behind them. Clara ran into Mary's arms, while Sarah threw herself at her father. "Are the bad men gone?" Clara asked. "They are gone, Nadoima." Mary kissed her daughter's forehead. "They will not bother us anymore. Mama fought them." Sarah's voice held wonder. She actually fought them. Mary looked at Ethan over the girls' heads. "We fought them together." That night, Mary sat on the porch with Ethan, watching the stars emerge one by one. Her body ached with exhaustion, but her heart was light. "Thank you for letting me come with you," she said. Ethan shook his head. "I should never have tried to leave you behind. You are the strongest woman I have ever known." Mary smiled. Stronger together, he kissed her forehead. Always, the captured rustlers talked. They always did eventually. It was Morrison, the sheriff confirmed, when he came to the ranch a week later. "Hired those men to drive you out. We have got witnesses now. He will face charges." Ethan nodded grimly. "And the debt he claims my wife owes." The sheriff shook his head. "I looked into it. Morrison bought that debt from the original creditors in Denver. Paid pennies on the dollar. The law is clear. A widow's debts do not transfer to a new husband, and marriage ends her liability for her previous husband's obligations." Mary felt tears of relief sting her eyes. "It is over then." "Not quite," the sheriff cautioned. "Morrison is a powerful man. He has got lawyers. He might fight the charges. Let him fight." Ethan's voice was steel. "We are not going anywhere." The next few weeks were tense. Morrison's lawyers did fight. They challenged the marriage, claiming it was fraudulent. They dug into Mary's past, painting her as a gold digger who had manipulated Ethan for his land. The town whispered. Some people believed the lies, others did not. But the Cole family stood firm. Sarah confronted Sally Morrison at school, not with fists this time, but with words. "My mama is not a fraud. She is the bravest person I know. Your father is a bully and a liar." The teacher had to separate them, but the damage was done. Sally Morrison went home in tears, and the other children started asking questions their parents could not answer. Clara, quiet Clara, who had been so afraid when they first arrived, stood up in church one Sunday and spoke. "My mama saved me. We were hungry and scared and alone, and Mr. Cole gave us a home. He did not have to. He just did, because he is kind. And now we are a family, a real family, and nothing anyone says will change that." The congregation was silent. Then Mrs. Murphy from the cafe started clapping. Then Mr. Miller from the general store. Then more and more until the whole church thundered with applause. Mary wept. That night, Ethan found her sitting alone in the garden, staring at the stars. "What are you thinking about?" Mary smiled. "I was thinking about the night we met, how scared I was, how certain I was that nothing good would ever happen to me again. And now I have everything." Mary turned to face him. "A home, daughters, a husband I love. I never thought I would have this." Ethan sat beside her and took her hand. "You deserve it. You always did." The court date arrived on a crisp morning in late April. The whole family dressed in their best and rode into town together. The courtroom was packed. Morrison sat on one side with his expensive lawyers. The Cole family sat on the other with nothing but the truth. The judge heard both sides. Morrison's lawyers painted Mary as a schemer. They produced documents showing the debt, testimony from Denver about William's gambling. But when it was Mary's turn to speak, she told the truth. All of it. She told the judge about William's lies, about the night he was killed, about fleeing Denver with nothing but Clara and the clothes on her back. She told him about Ethan's offer, how strange and wonderful and terrifying it had seemed, how she had fallen in love with him not because of his land, but because of his kindness. She told him about becoming a family, about Sarah calling her mama, about Clara learning to smile again. And when she finished, there was not a dry eye in the courtroom. The judge ruled in their favor. Morrison's claims were dismissed. The debt was declared void, and Morrison himself was found guilty of harassment and destruction of property. He was led from the courtroom in handcuffs, his face twisted with rage. "This is not over," he spat at Ethan. "I will destroy you." Ethan did not even flinch. "You already tried. You failed." The family walked out of the courthouse into the bright spring sunshine, and Mary felt lighter than she had in years. It was finally over. Summer came to the Double C Ranch in a blaze of golden heat. The cattle grew fat on the lush grass. The garden overflowed with vegetables. The girls spent their days swimming in the creek and chasing fireflies at dusk. And Mary discovered she was pregnant. She had suspected for weeks, but had been afraid to believe it. After everything she had been through, it seemed too good to be true. But when the doctor confirmed it, the joy she felt was overwhelming. She waited until dinner to tell Ethan. The whole family was gathered around the table, laughing about Sarah's latest adventure with the stubborn horse. "I have something to tell everyone." The table went quiet. Mary reached for Ethan's hand. "We are going to have a baby." For a moment, no one moved. Then Clara screamed with delight and threw herself at Mary. Sarah's eyes went wide, then filled with tears of joy. And Ethan, steady, strong Ethan, looked at Mary like she had hung the moon. "A baby," he whispered. Mary nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Our baby." He stood up so fast his chair fell over. He pulled her into his arms and held her like she was the most precious thing in the world. "I love you," he murmured against her hair. "I love you so much." The next few months were a whirlwind of preparation and anticipation. Ethan built a cradle himself, carving it from oak with intricate designs of horses and stars. Sarah and Clara argued endlessly about whether they wanted a brother or sister. Mary worked on a quilt for the baby, stitching it by the fire in the evenings, while Ethan read aloud from books of poetry his mother had loved. She had never been so happy. But happiness did not mean life stopped being hard. In late summer, a drought hit the region. The creek dried up. The grass turned brown. Cattle started dying. Ethan worked from dawn until after dark, trying to save what he could. Mary worked beside him, hauling water, moving herds to better grazing, doing whatever needed to be done. At night, she would collapse into bed exhausted, her back aching and her body heavy with the growing baby. But she never complained. This was her home, her family. She would fight for it. The drought finally broke in September when a thunderstorm rolled across the prairie and dumped inches of rain in a single night. The family stood on the porch and watched the lightning, the girls cheering with every crack of thunder. "We made it," Mary said softly. Ethan wrapped his arms around her from behind, his hands resting gently on her swollen belly. "We always do." October brought cool nights and golden days, and with them, the baby. Mary's labor started at dawn and lasted through the day. Ethan refused to leave her side, holding her hand through every contraction, wiping her brow, murmuring words of encouragement. "You are the strongest woman I know," he told her again and again. "You can do this." And she did. As the sun set over the prairie, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Mary brought their son into the world. He was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a shock of dark hair like his father's, and gray eyes that would one day match Ethan's exactly. "What should we name him?" Ethan asked, tears streaming down his face as he held his son for the first time. Mary smiled. "Something strong, something that fits a child born of second chances." They named him William after no one, just because they liked the sound of it. A fresh start, a new name for a new generation. That night, the whole family gathered in the bedroom. Sarah and Clara took turns holding their new baby brother, while Ethan sat beside Mary on the bed, his arm around her shoulders. "Our family," Clara said softly. "It is complete now." Mary looked around at the faces she loved more than anything in the world. Her husband, her daughters, her son. "Yes," she agreed, "it is complete." A year passed, then another. The Double C Ranch flourished under the care of its family. The herd grew larger, the fields produced abundant crops. The house rang with laughter and love. William took his first steps on the porch where Mary had once made the most important decision of her life. He said his first word there too, reaching for Ethan and calling out Papa with pure joy. Sarah grew into a confident young woman, as fearless as her father and as kind as Mary had taught her to be. She could outride half the ranch hands and out-negotiate them too. Clara blossomed into a gentle soul with a gift for healing. She tended the garden and nursed sick animals back to health, her patience and compassion touching everyone who knew her. And Mary and Ethan loved each other more with every passing day. One evening, as autumn painted the prairie gold and red, Mary stood on the porch watching her family. Sarah was teaching William to pet the horses, holding him steady while he giggled with delight. Clara sat in the garden, sketching wildflowers in a journal Mary had given her. Ethan came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about? You thinking?" Mary leaned back into his embrace. "Do you remember the day we met? Hard to forget." Ethan chuckled. "You looked ready to spit fire when I made my proposal." Mary smiled at the memory. "I thought you were crazy. I was. Crazy for you. I just did not know it yet." She turned in his arms to face him. "If you could go back, would you do it all again? Every single moment." Ethan cupped her face in his hands. "You and the girls are the best thing that ever happened to me." Mary rose up on her tiptoes and kissed him softly. "I love you, Ethan Cole. I love you, Mary Cole." That night, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Mary sat down at her writing desk. She had been thinking about her story for a long time, and she finally felt ready to tell it. She dipped her pen in ink and began to write. Dear reader, if you have ever felt alone in this world, if you have ever wondered if good things would ever come your way, I want to tell you a story. It is the story of a desperate woman and a lonely rancher, of two children who needed mothers and two adults who needed hope. It is a story about taking chances, about trusting strangers, about building family from nothing but courage and love. It is my story. Mary wrote through the night, pouring her heart onto the pages. She wrote about the fear and the hope, the struggles and the triumphs. She wrote about Morrison and the rustlers, about the drought and the baby, but mostly she wrote about love. Not the love of fairy tales, perfect and effortless, but real love, the kind that grows slowly, through hard work and forgiveness, the kind that deepens with every challenge and every dawn, the kind that makes a family. When the sun rose over the prairie, Mary set down her pen and looked at what she had written. It was not perfect, but it was true, and that was enough. 10 years had passed since Mary Whitfield arrived in Cedar Ridge with nothing but her daughter and a prayer. Now she stood on the porch of the Double C Ranch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold. The land stretched out before her, seedy and beautiful. No longer a stranger, but an old friend. So much had changed. Sarah was 19 now, engaged to a good young man who treated her like a queen. She would be married in the spring, and the house was already buzzing with wedding preparations. Clara was 17, kind and gentle and wise beyond her years. She had her mother's strength and her father's steadiness, and she made everyone around her better just by being present. William was 9, wild and fearless, and so like his father that it sometimes took Mary's breath away. He could ride and rope and knew every inch of the ranch like the back of his hand. And there was Emma, the surprise baby who had arrived 2 years after William. She was 7 now, with Mary's dark hair and Ethan's gray eyes, and she followed Clara around like a devoted shadow. 4 children, a thriving ranch, a love that had only grown stronger with time. Mary had never dreamed that life could be this good. "Mama," Emma tugged at her skirt. "Papa says dinner is ready." Mary smiled down at her youngest daughter. "Then we should not keep him waiting." The family gathered around the big kitchen table, just as they did every night. Ethan said grace, his voice deep and warm and full of gratitude. "Lord, thank you for this food and for the hands that prepared it. Thank you for this family and for all the blessings you have given us. Help us to be worthy of them." "Amen, amen," the family echoed. As they passed dishes and shared stories about their day, Mary looked around the table at the faces she loved, her husband, her children, her family. She thought about the scared, desperate woman she had been that day on the steps of Miller's General Store, how she had thought her life was over, how she had been so certain that nothing good would ever happen again. If only she could tell that woman what was coming. After dinner, Mary and Ethan walked out to the porch, leaving the children to argue about who would wash dishes. The evening air was cool and sweet, and the first stars were beginning to appear. "Happy?" Ethan asked, taking her hand. "More than I ever thought possible." He pulled her close. "I still remember the first time I saw you," he said, "sitting on those steps, holding Clara like you were ready to fight the whole world for her." "I was. I know." Ethan smiled. "That is why I fell in love with you." Mary leaned into him, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong against her cheek. "I was so scared to say yes. And now Now I cannot imagine any other life. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars multiply across the darkening sky. The sounds of their children's laughter drifted through the windows, mingling with the peaceful sounds of the ranch settling in for the night. Mary thought about all the roads that had led her to this moment, the pain and the loss, the fear and the uncertainty, the desperate gamble that had changed everything. She would not trade any of it, because every step, even the hardest ones, had brought her here, to this porch, this ranch, this man, this life, Mary. Ethan's voice was soft. Thank you. For what? For saying yes, for giving me a chance, for making this house a home, for everything. Mary smiled and rose up to kiss him. Thank you for asking. The kiss deepened, and for a moment, they were not the parents of 4 children or the owners of a successful ranch. They were just 2 people who had found each other against all odds and had chosen to love each other anyway. When they finally pulled apart, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. I love you, Mary Cole. I love you too, Ethan Cole. From inside the house, Emma's voice rang out. Mama? Papa? William put a frog in my bed again. Ethan sighed. That boy. Mary laughed. He is your son. They walked back into the house together, hand in hand, to deal with the latest crisis. But Mary was smiling. This was her life now, loud and messy and full of surprises, and she would not have it any other way.